Good afternoon, Key Stage 1. It's me in my house, looking out the window on a rather drizzly, miserable day. Have a look out there. Oh, look at that. It's quite a sad day today. So I thought I'd read you a story that is one of my favourites because it's my little boy's favourite book, and it's by Julia Donaldson. And I know I read one of hers earlier, but they're just so lovely to read out loud because of the rhyming language. They're really nice to say. And this one is Tyrannosaurus Drip. And he loves the pictures in this story. Well, he just loves dinosaurs, really. Okay, let's go. In a swamp beside a river where the land was thick with veg lived a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs who roamed the water's edge. And they hooted, "Up with rivers!" And they hooted, "Up with reeds!" And they hooted, "Up with bellyfuls of juicy water reeds!" Just realised my cat's on the bed, listening along to the story as well. Now, across the rushy river, on a hill the other side, lived a mean Tyrannosaurus with a grim and grisly bride. And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" And they shouted, "Up with war!" And they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur!" But the two Tyrannosauruses, so grisly, mean and grim, couldn't catch the duck-billed dinosaurs because they couldn't swim. And they muttered, "Down with water!" And they muttered, "Down with wet!" And they muttered, "What a shame that bridges aren't invented yet." Now, a Compsognathus, but for short we'll call her Comp, thank goodness for that, found a duckbill egg and stole it from a nest beside the swamp. And she swam with it and ran with it and murmured, "Clever me, and won't the baby Comps be thrilled with duckbill egg for tea?" She dropped the egg in terror and went running for her life from the mean Tyrannosaurus and his grim and grisly wife. And the duckbill egg went rolling, and at last it came to stop and rest in, of all unlikely places, the Tyrannosaurus nest. Now, the mother tea had great big jaws and great enormous legs, but her brain was rather little, and she couldn't count her eggs, and she sang, "Hatch out, my terrors, with your scaly little tails, and your spiky little toothies, and your scary little nails." Out hatched babies 1 and 2, as perfect as can be, but Mother T was horrified by baby number 3. She grumbled, "He looks weedy," and she grumbled, "He looks weak," and she grumbled, "What long arms, and look, his mouth is like a beak." "He just needs feeding up," said Dad, and gave the babies some meat. The first 2 gulped and guzzled, and the third refused to eat, and he said, "I'm really sorry," and he said, "I simply can't," and he said, "This meat looks terrible. I'd rather eat a plant." "A plant?" yelled Mum in horror, and Dad said, "Get a grip." His sisters found a name for him, Tyrannosaurus Drip, and they shouted, "Up with hunting!" and they shouted, "Up with war!" and they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur." Poor Tyrannosaurus Drip tried hard to sing along, but the others yelled, "You silly Drip, you've got the words all wrong." For he hooted, "Down with hunting!" and he hooted, "Down with war!" and he hooted, "Down with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur." So he ran off to the river, where he saw a lovely sight, a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs all hooting with delight. And they hooted, "Up with rivers!" and they hooted, "Up with reeds!" and they hooted, "Up with bellyfuls of juicy water reeds." And he stood there on the bank. A sudden urge took hold of him, and he jumped into the water and discovered he could swim. And the duckbills came to greet him by the rushy river's edge, and they hooted, "Nice to see you!" and they hooted, "Have some veg!" And Drip, who was delighted that they hadn't run away, ate bellyfuls of water reeds and played with them all day. Then he gazed into the river, and he asked them, "Whoa, who is that creature in the water? And they laughed and said, "It's you." He's looking at his reflection. That night the lightning crackled and a storm blew down a tree, and it fell across the river, and the tees cried out, "Yippee!" And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" And they shouted, "Up with war!" And they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur!" Drip's sisters stepped onto the bridge and then began to frown, for there in front of them stood Drip, who yelled, "Look down, look down!" And they looked down into the water, and they each let out a yelp, and one cried, "Water monsters!" and the other one cried, "Help!" Their mother scolded, "Nonsense!" and she joined them on the tree. Then she looked into the water and exclaimed, "Good gracious me!" The three of them stood trembling, and the dad yelled, "Get a grip! You're all of you as drippy as Tyrannosaurus Drip." And he strode on to the bridge and scoffed, "I bet there's nothing there." Then he looked into the water and he jumped into the air. And how the duckbills hooted when he landed with a crash, and the tree bridge broke, and 4 Tyrannosauruses went splash! And spluttering and clinging to the branches of the tree, they went whooshing down the waterfall and all the way to sea. And the duckbills hooted happily, and they hooted, "Hip, hip, hip, hooray for the heroic, the one and only Duckbill Drip." And he's found his place where he belongs. Look up here, I'll show you. Where are you? Oh. What are you doing up here? What are you doing up here? This happens in the rain. My cats all sort of descend upstairs onto various beds and warm, cosy places. So if you're at home, I suspect you might be snuggled up, maybe watching a film, maybe sharing a story or doing some drawing. And if you are at school or have been at school yesterday or you're going tomorrow, I suspect there'll be exciting things there for you to do as well. So whatever you're doing right now, you'll all be home right now, cozy up, snuggle up, find something really comforting to eat. Someone might have something nice in the cupboards at home if you ask really nicely. Hot chocolate's quite good at this time, I think. Sorry, mums and dads. And I will look forward to seeing you again next week. Hopefully the sun will be shining. Let's hope so. Take care. See you soon.